Today we are going to look at and discuss portraits and self-portraits. So a portrait is a painting, photograph, sculpture, or other artistic representation of a person. The face and the expression of the face is usually the main focus. The difference between a portrait and a self-portrait is that a self-portrait is a representation of the artist. It is drawn, painted, photographed, or sculpted by the artist themselves. In portraits and self-portraits, the artist tries to display the likeness, personality, and sometimes even the mood of the person. And we can't begin a portrait video without talking about the Mona Lisa, the most famous painting in the entire world, created by Leonardo da Vinci, who was a very famous artist during that time. Who was she? Everybody wanted to know who she was. There is a mystery surrounding who she really was. Some say she was the wife of a wealthy merchant. Others say maybe she was Leonardo da Vinci's girlfriend. And her smile, is she really smiling? Or is she smirking, trying to keep a secret? Sfumato is the background that Leonardo da Vinci created with the hazy, blurry look. Very, very new during this time. And her eyes, so much focus and attention is drawn to her eyes. The horizon line makes you focus on her eyes. Are her eyes staring at us? Her eyebrows and her eyelashes were never painted. Some say Leonardo da Vinci never finished the painting. Others say that throughout the years they've just rubbed away. And in 1911, the Mona Lisa was stolen off the walls of the Louvre, only to be recovered and become the most famous, the most talked about, the most sang about painting in the entire world. Girl with a Pearl Earring by artist Johannes Vermeer, created in 1665, over 100 years after the Mona Lisa. But she was nicknamed the Mona Lisa of the North because she too would become one of the most famous portraits in the world. Very different background than the Mona Lisa, isn't it? This black background actually has a green paint underneath. And what makes this painting so special and so expensive is that the blue in her scarf was actually made with a semi-precious stone called lapis lazuli. Now, this is very different than the two previous paintings we looked at, where the color is far from realistic. This painting is called Marilyn Monroe by Andy Warhol, and it was created in 1967. Marilyn Monroe was an actress, model, and singer at the time, and this is called pop art. Pop art is when artists use things from popular culture, things that were very well known during the time, and they created artwork out of them. In this case, Marilyn Monroe, who was very popular at the time, was done in a silkscreen type of painting by Andy Warhol. Silkscreening is basically a stenciling technique where a design is cut out of a strong material or thick paper, and then it's painted by rubbing, rolling, or spraying paint or ink through the cutouts. And so each area of color is a new cutout. The Kiss by Gustav Klimt, created in 1908. So here you see two people in this portrait painting. This painting was bought before it was even finished, which was very rare during this time and very exciting for the artist. It must have been really expensive because the yellow that you see is actually made with real gold leaf powder, as well as silver and platinum. He would use these gold, silvers, and platinums to make his art shimmer and glimmer. Artist Giuseppe Arkemboldo. This portrait is called Vertumne. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it was a time when this artist was composing portraits made with fruits, vegetables, fish, and trees. This is a portrait of the Roman Emperor Rudolph II, painted in 1590, and it portrays him as a Roman god of seasons, gardens, fruit trees, and nature. American Gothic. painted by Grant Wood in 1930. Again, two people in this portrait in front of a home holding a pitchfork. America was sinking further and further into the Great Depression, and there was a real sense of desperation around the country and a sense of wanting to return to the authentic American values like home and family. The pitchfork actually symbolizes hard work and honest labor. It's the idea of a self-made man and the American dream. You've probably heard of the artist who cut off the bottom part of his ear. This is him, Self-Portrait with Bandaged Ear by Vincent Van Gogh in 1889. This self-portrait was actually done soon after he harmed his ear. Nobody really knows why he did it, but they say that he had an argument with one of his dear friends, Paul Gauguin, another very famous artist, and he accidentally or purposefully cut off the bottom part of his ear. He happens to be one of my favorite artists, and he is known for his thick application of paint on canvas called impasto. He is very well known for creating over 30 self-portraits, very prolific artists in self-portraits. He only ever sold one painting during his lifetime, which was very sad for an artist who was trying to make it with his art. However, his last painting sold for $82.5 billion. Another artist who painted many self-portraits. This one is called Self-Portrait with Thorn Necklace and Hummingbird by Mexican artist Frida Kahlo, created in 1940. Frida didn't always want to be an artist. She lived a life of pain both physically and emotionally. When Frida was 6 years old, she had polio, which led to a disability. And then a major accident changed her life, and that's when she began to paint. She began to paint portraits of herself in the hospital, and she was known for painting her injuries and disabilities instead of hiding them. She is often asked why she paints so many self-portraits, and she answers, quote, "I paint self-portraits because I am so often alone, because I am the person I know best," end quote. The thorns represent the pain and anguish she felt, and hummingbirds often symbolize healing, freedom, and life. The Scream by artist Edvard Munch, created in 1893. Edvard Munch wrote in his diary that his inspiration for The Scream came from a memory of when he was walking at sunset with two friends on a road like this. When he began to feel deeply tired and sad, he stopped to rest, leaning against the railing. He felt anxious and experienced a scream that seemed to pass through all of nature, with a bright red sunset in the background. It symbolizes the darkly troubled times Munch was experiencing as he dealt with mental illness and trauma, and his attempt to rationalize and explain his experience through what he knew best, painting. Pablo Picasso. He is probably one of the most prolific artists in the world, hundreds of paintings, and he was always coming up with new and different ways to shock people and create different types of artwork. He is probably most famous for these three styles: the Blue period, the Rose period, and the Cubist period. They're all portraits, but as you can see, they are all very different. The Blue period was at a time in Picasso's life where he was very sad, so he wanted to show sadness, loneliness, and all shades of blue. And then he became happy, and he created what's called the Rose period, and he focused a lot on portraits of circus people. And he was still striving to do something different, something the art world had never seen, and that's when he invented the style called Cubism. The one on the right, Girl Before a Mirror, as you can see, is far from realistic. He wanted to move away from realism and create something new, bold, and different. Le Désespéré, The Desperate Man by Gustave Courbet, 1845. When you look at this self-portrait, you do not only experience his desperation, as the title suggests, but you also get the idea of what kind of personality Gustave Courbet was. He was bold, shrewd, radical, ambitious, and determined. Portraits during this time were traditionally vertical, up and down, but Courbet chose to do this self-portrait using a landscape orientation or sideways orientation for his painting. It sure is eye-catching and attention-grabbing, isn't it? Another self-portrait, done in a very different way than the previous ones. This artist is M.C. Escher. He created it in 1943 using the technique printmaking. He produced many self-portraits like this, pictures of himself while being reflected in a mirrored sphere held by his hand. Escher was fascinated with visual illusions, mirrored reflections, and perceptual self-references. He often depicts the world from unexpected angles, like this one, where he emphasizes the hand holding the sphere where his mirrored face is projected. This is a lithography, which is a print using stone or a metal plate that has a smooth surface. Another self-portrait by artist Chuck Close, created in 2017. This is called photorealism or grid painting. Chuck Close's distinctive paintings are huge canvases that depict faces, portraits. Very often they're his own, so we would call them a self-portrait. He works in a non-traditional manner by combining many small geometric forms, usually squares or rectangles, to create a portrait. I encourage you to look at this picture and squint your eyes. Go ahead, squint your eyes. You see how it comes to life? If you were to walk up close and you'd see each one of these squares or rectangles, each one is a little abstract painting, but from afar, or when you squint and blur them together, you see an amazing portrait. Now that we have briefly spoken about 13 of the most famous portraits and self-portraits in all of art history, let's look at some of these that I just pulled off of Google. These are all portraits, maybe some of them self-portraits, and they're all done in a different technique. All of them, however, show value. So the first two on the left of the two girls, that pencil value with an accent color, is a very nice way to really focus on one color and really give it a dramatic look, where the red of the stripes of the shirt or the red in the lips is the only color outside of the value of pencil. Next to those two portraits is a portrait of a teenage boy, only using the value of a pencil, the darks, the mediums, the lights of the grays that only a pencil can create. Again, showing shadows, some very contrasting lights and some very darks. The three on the right of the girls, the purple, the blue, and the orange, are what we call monochromatic pieces of art, where one hue is used and the tints and shades of that hue are used. So in the purple, you see all different values of purple. In the blue, almost like the Picasso, but she looks like she's smiling, all different shades of blue. And on the right, all shades of orange, again, showing lights, mediums, and darks, all in a very realistic way. The bottom left two, the hatching and the cross-hatching, are done with either a pen or a pencil, and depending on how close or far apart the lines are, gives you that sense of a dark value or a light value. Moving on to the middle bottom section, the continuous line is sort of like a long string or a long line done with your pencil or pen to create your image. Again, the closer the lines are together, the darker the shadow will appear. The farther your lines are, the lighter it will appear. And the last two on the bottom right is what we would call stippling or pointillism, basically done in polka dots. And again, the closer or tighter they are, the darker value you will get. The farther apart the dots are, the lighter the value you will get. As you can see, portraits can come in all different shapes and sizes and styles and colors. There are so many different ways that you can create artwork depicting a portrait or a self-portrait.